embodiment, that we're giving this machine a body, that it's not just about bits. And the way we're doing that is by ourselves, and the things that we carry around become the senses for this. So there was a very famous media theorist called Marshall McLuhan, and one of his primary ideas was that machines that we make are extensions of our senses. That the microphone was an extension of our ears, the camera an extension of our eyes, the wheel in a car the extension of our feet. And what I'm suggesting is that we're reversing that in fact we as humans are now becoming the senses for the machine. That the things that we do and the things that we carry around, like our camcorders and our cell phone cameras and our recording devices and this camera, all these things are becoming the eyes and the ears of the machine. And there are billions of, the machine has billions of eyes now and billions of ears. It's listening. We're giving it all the data that a body would have. So that's a very simple idea. Just that we're embodying this thing with the materials and the senses that we bring to it. Now the third idea that this machine is doing is structuring of knowledge. And this is a little bit more abstract, but I think it's also very important. And again, I think this will give you some suggestion about what's happening to the web in the next 5 years. Because this is a step that's happening right now. It's somewhat invisible, but it will have a huge effect on things like websites, e-commerce, publishing, and other aspects of web business. And it has to do with the fact that throughout history, what we have been doing with our culture and science and technology is finding new ways to structure and organize information, beginning with a library, the first libraries back during the Greeks, which tried to, with an index, organize knowledge and index it. So the index was a way of organizing information and knowledge. Then we have collaborative encyclopedias about 1,000 years ago, the first ones where they actually tried to work together to structure knowledge in a new way as an encyclopedia. We had things in the invention of the scientific methods, such as the idea that what you needed to do with an experiment was to make it so that someone else could repeat it. So you embedded the instructions of your data, how you got the data. You embedded the instructions with the data. So there was a metadata that went along with it. It's like, if you want to get this information yourself, here's how you do it. And then there were things like peer review, and we all know about that in science, in a journal, where you have other authorities evaluate and check and endorse. You have peer-to-peer. This is where peer-to-peer comes from. So the idea that many people make something very accurate. And we have other innovations in the scientific method, such as a double-blind experiment, which we now take for granted. It seems odd to imagine a time when there was not the idea of a double-blind placebo experiment, but that was not invented until 1950. It's just a blink of an eye. And what I'm suggesting through all this is that we've just begun to find and discover the ways to structure information. Another way you could say this is that the history of the scientific method is maybe 400 years old. The scientific method itself is going to change more in the next 50 years than it has in the last 400 years. So the things that we're doing now are beginning to change the very nature of how science is done Another way of saying that is that we're changing the very nature of what we understand as knowledge. Another way of saying that is that we're changing how we know things. Okay? A lot of what we think we know in the world is through the scientific method. We're changing how we do that, so we're changing, in fact, how we know things. So in the future, we can expect something like wiki science, which is like the Wikipedia. It's an ongoing process. Maybe papers are never published. They're never finished. They're just constantly worked on, just like an encyclopedia, Wikipedia article. They have many, many authors. It used to be a scientific paper had 1 or 2 authors. It's not uncommon for a paper in biology or the high particle physics to have 100 authors. So we're expanding, we're making a very collaborative process. And there's another idea like negative results. What happens in science is that someone does an experiment and it doesn't work. That information is not reported. That information is not published. But it should be, because it would save tons and tons of people in the future from repeating that experiment. But because in the past of the scarcity of paper and publishing, negative results were not published, but they could be now in this new world, where basically everything that you do, every experiment, is in some ways reported. This is just an example of how the web and the laws of the new media will affect how we know things. Another aspect of the web that we don't normally think about is, of course, everybody knows how it works. There's a web page, and that web page links to other web pages in this kind of a fashion. It seems very obvious to now. It was invented not too long ago. It's called hypertext. It was an idea that someone should have thought of before, but it's very, very recent. But in fact, it's actually only a rough idea of how things could work, because when you're pointing to a page, a page is a very big thing with lots of ideas on it. Or you can imagine if you were pointing to a movie. Well, the movie is very complex. What you really want to be able to do is you want to be able to point to an idea on that page. Or if you want to point from a page to a YouTube clip in a particular scene in a movie, or a particular idea in a movie, or a particular idea on a page. And when we start to do that, we go from a word to another word rather than just to another page, which we can't do right now. As the web develops that, again, that begins to more resemble our own brains, because we have a link between an idea to an idea. In our own brains, we don't link, we have an idea to a page. No, we have an idea to an idea. And so the next step in the development of the web